And welcome back, everyone. It's a beautiful Saturday night, and my apologies for about the half an hour delay, but I really wanted to talk about a lot of big, grandiose topics tonight, some of them with brevity, some of them I'm giving myself permission to go on a little bit and go in more detail, or maybe some of you would consider that rambling for some of these topics. But we are going to be talking about tonight a little bit of USC recruiting, which was an improvisational ad by me, as Talanoa Ili committed to the Trojans today. Huge linebacker commit for them, primarily recruited by Rob Ryan. I also want to discuss who I think are the best programs in college football right now. That's what I want to talk about. And in addition to that, I want to discuss Big Ten win totals. No duh. That's the main purpose of this live show. Some of my early college football playoff predictions, which it isn't going to be me filling out a bracket and showing you a bracket. I'm just making a set of predictions, some of them bold, some of them not, for what I think this college football playoff could look like. That's because I am 99% sure of what my bracket will look like, but I just want to leave some room for error, especially as I continue to figure out the edits for what that will look like. After all, I'm my own podcaster. I talk into my own mic, obviously, but I also am my own producer for the show, and I also do all the graphics that you see on your screen. For the cover arts, I'd like to shout out my graphic designer, Brycen, for that. If you ever have any need for graphic design work, he's awesome, and he'll offer you what he thinks is a fair price, and I think he's pretty good there. His email's in the description if you ever need a graphic design service, and he's not paying for me to say that, by the way. I really enjoy working for him. He's awesome to work with, so shout out to Brycen for making this possible. I also want to go through an interesting college football playoff proposal submitted by someone as a question that I wanted to get to but didn't until now, so my apologies to that viewer. I also want to talk about some teams that need to put up or shut up, which is in relationship to another question. And last but certainly not least, I want to talk about my top 10. And that will be the show. So stick around for the next hour or so. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Be on here for an hour 30. And then after that, I got to bolt and immediately get to some other things on what has been a very busy Sunday. If you could, it would mean a lot to me, be praying for my mother. She may have gotten her knee blown out. Like, she may have tore her ACL or tore something. I don't know. So just be praying for her. She's going to get that checked out right now. And I should have a rough idea of what's wrong with her probably tonight before I go to bed, but I don't exactly know. Someone sent a super chat of $5. I appreciate it, Will. I will get to that either in a break or toward the end of the show, but thank you for the $5 chat. Just wanted to shout that out there. I appreciate it very much. If any of you have questions that you want me to answer during transitions from topics or at the end of the show with brevity, because I do have things outside of live streaming, send in a super chat and your question will certainly get answered. I'll be obligated to do that. And also, if you just have any questions and you don't want a super chat or you can't, I understand not always having enough money to do things like that, or you just don't want to because it's a YouTube live, not like you're buying food or anything or something more important. Just put a question in there and I might answer it anyway. So I want to kick this off by talking about USC recruiting, because USC has almost 30 commits in their 2026 recruiting class, 29 to be exact, and it's ranked number 1 nationally. Talanoa Ili is USC's latest addition from Kahuku, Hawaii High School and the city where he is from in the class of 2026. 6'3", 215 pounds, top 100 player in the 2026 class. He has a 94 overall grade from 24/7 Sports, third best linebacker in America according to 24/7 Sports, number one overall player in Hawaii per 24/7 and the composite. From a composite standpoint, he's the fourth best linebacker with 0.9616 overall grade. And he committed to USC, primarily recruited by Rob Ryan, their linebackers coach. He visited the Trojans on June 6th. This is a pretty big commitment in a class that I've noticed is really focusing on what a lot of us would consider, quote, Big Ten positions. More so in almost air quotes than quotes, because yeah, you have to recruit quarterback, you have to recruit wide receiver. It's not just all about trench play and defense. That's the mistake that Iowa and some of these other programs make. But USC isn't doing that. Riley's already a master at quarterbacking, at developing the QB position, at scheming things up to make the quarterback as successful as he can be. And I love their wide receivers coach, Dennis Simmons. Love him. I think he's one of the best in the business. You look at what this class has right now. Their best players are an offensive tackle and tight end. Third best player is Talanoa Ili, linebacker. Fourth best is a defensive lineman, same with the fifth and sixth best. Seventh best is a running back. Eighth best is a corner. Ninth wide receiver. 10th corner. The vast majority of their top 10 players are on defense. And if you want to include the O-line there, or just look at O-line and D-line, I think around half of their top 10 players are in the trenches, and best overall player being an offensive tackle. I think that Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowen and Eric Henderson, head coach, general manager, defensive line coach, offensive line coach, D'Anton Lynn, the defensive coordinator, I think they all understand that for USC to take the next step, it's not just about getting another 5-star QB. They already got Hassan Longstreet in the 2025 class. It's not about getting even more good wide receivers. Remember, Zachariah Branch, 5-star. Deuce Robinson, 5-star. Mekhi Lemon, 5-star. Two of them are gone. Lemon, I think, is going to be one of the best wide receivers in America. And they still have, I think, plenty of good wide receivers behind him and around him, like Jacoby Lane, for example. And I imagine someone who we don't know about yet is going to have a good year there. They need to build in the trenches. They need to build at linebacker, providing depth besides just having Eric Gentry and some other young players. I mean, that's why they got Tamir Robinson in the portal. They needed more depth. And Eric Gentry is going to be gone after this year. So having another freak athlete at that position can certainly help. And I think that's where Talanoa Ili comes in. And to have 29 commits in the month of June, it seems like USC is going to hold on to at least most of them, as a lot of them are from the West Coast, from California. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And if you haven't already, especially if you're a USC fan, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, and also comment your reaction to this commitment specifically and where you think USC's recruiting class will finish. I've made several videos about USC's recruiting endeavors. And last season, it all fell apart. But this season, they're focusing more on the West Coast and trying to lock that down more than ever before. And based on what I've heard about their NIL and their deals, I think they finally have the proper alignment to where they can keep some high-end players from decommitting. I think there's a lot of buy-in with USC, a lot of faith. I will go as far to say that while I think Lincoln Riley's under vast competitive pressure, and I don't think his seat is as cold as ice cream like Ryan Day's or Kirby Smart's or Dan Lanning's or Steve Sarkisian's, I don't quite think he's necessarily on the hot seat either. I don't think USC has to win 9, 10, 11 games for him to keep his job. I don't. I think that what they're doing on the recruiting trail, what they did last year with the vast improvements on defense, and even with that schedule where they had to travel all across America and where they had some bad losses, they also had some impressive performances and clearly were, I think, the most physical team that Riley's ever produced. Riley's made changes. The staff has made changes. They're recruiting at a high level. I love most of the staff in a developmental sense, and that's why I can imagine Talanoa Ili and many of these other players. And if I'm not saying his name wrong, my apologies. That's why I think a lot of these players are going to USC. And no, I don't think, for example, that Kenyi Pepe, 5-star offensive tackle who was a top 10 player nationally per 24/7 Sports, I don't think he would go to USC under the previous regime. If it was this time last season, no, I don't think he would go there. I don't think Mark Bowman would go to USC. I think he would go to Texas, Georgia, maybe he would have went to Oregon. Ili, I can imagine he would have more than likely considered, maybe still considered USC, but maybe Oregon as well. And yet here we are, and USC is doing a better job, especially of locking down the state of California, but they may finish out recruiting better at a national level. Before we end off this segment here, just a little bit more about Ili. 6'3", 215 pounds. We already talked about that. Greg Biggins, in his recruiting evaluation, his scout report, says that he made a move from Southern California to Hawaii. 3-year starter at Orange Lutheran, one of the state's top programs, and was arguably the best all-around linebacker in the state, regardless of class as a junior. Very versatile, physical, and has a frame to play inside, athletic enough to play in cover and space outside, and offers a pass rush ability. So he's a pretty versatile Swiss Army knife. Big hitter who loves contact, still is pretty lean, but has the frame to easily add good weight and should play close to 240 or so pounds at the next level. With his all-around skill set, along with his toughness and competitive level, Ili has a great chance to be a multi-year starter in college as well, and an early impact player. Also starred in track, was scheduled to visit Oregon. I do not know if that's still going on, but was scheduled to visit there, scheduled to visit Notre Dame. In fact, I think visited Notre Dame and then committed to USC on his visit for June 15th, visited Oklahoma. So a lot of top contenders, Notre Dame and Oklahoma, who've been better on defense, much better on defense recently than USC, were in contention, and yet USC got him. So awesome win for Lincoln Riley, for D'Anton Lynn, Rob Ryan, and Chad Bowen. I imagine this USC recruiting class is going to hover around 30 to 35 commits in that range. And if they can hold on to the majority of these guys, I think they will sign at minimum a top 3, top 5 class to end the year. If they can hover around 30 to 35, like I think they can, they'll definitely sign the number 1 class just based on quantity alone, along with being one of the higher end quality classes in the 2026 cycle. We'll now move on to who I think the best programs are in college football. But before that, I do actually want to get to this super chat. That's what I want to get to here that was sent in just before more comments obviously come in, and then they'll bury it. I don't like it when my super chats are buried, not one bit. So I'll bring this up here, and then we'll get back to the topic at hand. Thank you again to Will8282 for the $5 super chat. It says, with Michigan getting hammered more likely than ever, how does that affect recruiting? Well, first and foremost, I do want to ask, what makes you think that it's more likely than ever? At this point, I don't have much of an idea. I don't think Michigan will get destroyed, but that's my personal opinion. And if it happens, then it's college football, and we'll all move on if Michigan gets destroyed in an enforceable way. But one, what makes you think that they're going to get hammered, and what do you define as the hammer? Number two, in my mind, a hammer would be a 2 or 3 year postseason ban, crippling fines or reductions of scholarships in some way that is enforceable, because just a scholarship reduction won't do anything with NIL. You'd have to reduce the roster. You'd have to go in and legally somehow enforce Michigan having a smaller roster. That would do damage for sure. If that happened, and how does it affect recruiting? I would say that depends on the amount of buy-in that the donors and the brass have with Sharon Moore. If they have faith in him and they think that he can win big at Michigan, then I think its effects will more so be short-term than long-term. Unless, of course, he's show-caused and he's just banned from college football. And at that point, you have a new coaching staff that will probably tank recruiting for at least a year, I would say. And then from there, we'll have to see what happens. But when I look at the current situation with Michigan and the resources that they have, I think that the biggest thing the NCAA could do to really mess with Michigan recruiting is the show cause. I think that if you... Oh, also in the chat, someone said go Ducks. So Puddles, thank you for coming in. Go Ducks. You'll be very excited to see some of my thoughts on Oregon, especially at the end of the video where I do a top 10. I'm higher on Oregon, just saying that so that you can stick around. The more Oregon followers, the more college football followers in general I can have, the better. But some of these newer Big Ten teams I haven't exactly reached out to a ton because I used to only cover the Big Ten. Now we're trying to expand. So the more fan bases from bigger, non-traditional Big Ten teams we can get, the better, to kind of balance everything out. But of course, if you're a Nebraska fan, Michigan fan, Ohio State fan, or Penn State fan, I, of course, want you to subscribe. And then Justin Rogg, thank you for being here. Go Big Red. Man, anything Nebraska reminds me of a collaboration with Corn Crazed. I'm looking forward to the next one of those. But anyway, I don't want to get too off topic. So Will_8282, again with the question, with Michigan getting hammered more likely than ever, how does that affect recruiting? It depends on what they do with Sharon Moore, I think. I think the only way you're going to get Michigan recruiting imploding is Moore gets hit with a show cause or they have a 3-year or longer postseason ban. Because if it's 1 year, well, Michigan isn't even favored to reach the playoffs this year. And I think most have an understanding that this team will be contending for the playoffs, but they're not a national title contender. If it's a 2-year postseason ban, that certainly makes things tougher. Certainly does. However, whether it's Bryce Underwood or whether it's other players in last year's recruiting class or this year's, you're still going to at least have a year of needed eligibility before you go to the NFL where you will have a shot at the postseason. And postseason play can help or hurt your draft stock, but if you play well in the regular season, you can also just get drafted based on that. So I think that it depends really on whether the donors like Moore and what his punishment is in this whole NCAA cheating scandal thing. If he gets show-caused, that'll affect recruiting. If Michigan gets hit with severe penalties and the donors factor that in with what Moore has produced and say, yeah, it's not worth it, we either fire him or we let the resources go and see what he can do, that would also affect recruiting. However, I think that if Michigan just gets a 1-year postseason ban and fines and scholarship reductions, but nothing else, I don't think that will do much. I don't. It's a one-year ban. And yeah, the portal will open up and maybe some people will leave, but if the donors want certain players to stay, they will be paid and they will stay. And also, Michigan isn't... This is not like a national title caliber team, and I think to a certain degree everyone understands that. So it's like what someone just said in the chat. Multiple season postseason ban is the only penalty that'll carry any weight at all. If they aren't imposing a postseason ban, may as well have been zero penalty. That is the only way that you'd have significant weight to any of this. I wouldn't even say just a 1 year. A 1 year, I would consider par for the course of probably being a major punishment. Definitely. Any type of postseason ban's a major punishment. But 2 years or longer, and I'd say more likely 3 years or longer, is the only way that you're going to destroy Michigan by completely outside force. If a 1 or 2 year postseason ban wrecks Michigan football, then Michigan football's infrastructure is poor and the coaching staff was certainly not good by any stretch of the imagination. So thanks again, Will, for that $5 super chat. Sage, Ohio, go Buckeyes. Nice to see you in here. Chase R, go Big Red. Thank you for coming on. This is a live stream that I am very much excited for. And before we continue again, like the stream if you haven't, and share it around, please. And thank you. So now we're going to move on to who I think the best programs are in college football. I'm going to give you my 16 best programs in college football. I'm very excited for this. And the number 16, because in 2026 and moving forward, we're probably going to have a 16-team college football playoff. So I just want to simplify it. I want to get it out of the way and just adjust my mind to 16 a little bit early. If we move to 14, oh well, who cares? The remaining two will be teams that will have an argument for being left out in an unfair manner, like what Florida State had in 2023, which I think was a snub, or what Alabama had last year, which I don't think was as legitimate of a complaint. Being left out of the four-team CFP has, I think, a lot more validity to complaining if you're the fifth best team, than if you get left out of the 12th and you're the 13th best. Because in college football, we all know that typically there are only 3 national championship caliber teams in a given year, sometimes more, sometimes many more, but also sometimes there's only one team all season where it's very clear they're going to win it all. In hindsight, that was 2021 Georgia. No one was even close to them, for example. My main criteria is the past 4 years weighted on the more recent years. So one is more weight. Year one has more weight, as in 1 year removed from today. 2024 is more weight than 2023, which is more weight than 2022. You get the point. Record in the college football playoff versus top 10 teams in the end of the year football power index, and maybe as kind of a tiebreaker, resources. But we're mainly looking at the past, so again, resources is more of a tiebreaker than anything else. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, comment your top programs in college football down below. I don't care if it's only 5, 10, or 16 like mine. Just tell me who you think the best programs are in college football over the past 4 years in recent memory. And also, visit my video description if you want to find out other ways to support the channel, like purchasing merchandise, joining our free Discord server, etc., and like, share, and subscribe. Let's start off with number 16. The best programs in college football. 16th, I have Miami. They have a 29-21 record since 2021, 17-15 in the ACC. No college football playoff appearances, and they have an 0-2 record versus FPI top 10. And those 2 losses came in 2021 against Alabama and 2022 against Clemson. They have not played an end-of-season FPI top 10 team since 2022. So an easy schedule and a lot of failures on the way. So why does this guy here in the white t-shirt and my specific haircut, and maybe you think I'm an idiot, or maybe you think I'm really smart. So why do I have Miami up here? Well, I have Miami at 16th and actually ahead of USC, who I would have placed at 17th, because Miami's trending up. They're recruiting well. Last year they finished top 10 in power ratings. And what made me choose them over USC, who I think has better standing being in the Big Ten, so their floor and ceiling is probably a little bit higher. They're a blue blood and Miami isn't, and I think Lincoln Riley's a better head coach than Mario Cristobal, and they're having a lot of momentum on the recruiting trail. But on the field, USC's gotten worse every year, and Miami winning 10 games last year and doing what they did with Cam Ward, and then making the staff changes they needed to fix the defense, at least in theory, entering 2025, that gives me a boost for them over USC. So Miami's here at 16th. This is not the video to talk about what I think of program futures all that much, but I'm high on Miami in the future. I think they'll be on the rise from here on out. Kansas State's different in the sense that they're the only Big 12 team I have on here, and that's because of their consistency and how I view Chris Kleiman. They have a 36-17 record over the past 4 seasons, 22-14 in the Big 12. They did win the Big 12, which gives me a lot of respect towards them. No college football playoff appearances, but I don't think you'd expect that of Kansas State. They're 0-5 versus the FPI top 10 in recent memory, TCU wasn't FBI top 10 in 2022. They were top 15, and they barely lost to Texas that year, barely lost to Texas in 2023. This is a team that punches well above their weight class, and that's a credit to their coaching staff. That's a credit to the fact that they do a good job with the resources they have, and they have a good culture, and they're a winning program right now. I don't have Utah higher than them. I would if Utah came into the Big 12 and did really well, but Utah's had some lackluster past 2 seasons. Kansas State's past 2 seasons are both 9-4, and arguably seasons where they've upgraded their roster talent and stayed steady even with some pretty severe changes like Colin Klein, their longtime OC, leaving. At 14th, I have SMU. The Pony Express is back, and now paying players is legal, but that's not why I have them as the 14th best program. They have a lot of resources, but resources in this video is essentially more of a tiebreaker than anything else. They're 37-16 on the field over the past 4 seasons with a 25-7 conference record in both the American and the ACC. I'm bullish on them because Rhett Lashley came into the ACC in year 1, and yes, he had an easy schedule, but they went undefeated in conference. Their only regular season loss was to an 11-win physical BYU team. They've won the American under Lashley. They played in the ACC championship game this past season. They lost in the playoffs to a Penn State team who I think if they had Manny Diaz instead of Tom Allen would have went to the national championship game and probably would have beaten Oregon for the Big Ten or maybe Ohio State in the regular season. There's no shame in losing to Penn State in Happy Valley is what I'm trying to say. And they're 0-2 versus the FBI top 10. Lost to Penn State last season. Clemson wasn't quite top 10, but they almost came back and beat Clemson. This team has a bright future, but more importantly, in recent memory, they have been one of the better programs, especially with their impressive 2024 campaign where they won 11 games. We have LSU at 13th. They've been 35-17, 20-12 over the past 4 seasons. No college football playoff appearances, which I think is a little disappointing. But they have a 2-4 record versus the FPI top 10. Brian Kelly beat Nick Saban in 2022. I think that still holds some weight going to the SEC championship game in his first year there. And even though ever since then they haven't quite overachieved like they did in 2022, they went 10-3 and then 9-4 in what I still think is the toughest conference in America. And no, I'm not an SEC guy. I'm from the North. So when I say that, that's just what my brain tells me. I think the Big Ten's caught up a lot to the SEC, but the SEC's bottom feeders I still think are much better on an average basis than the Big Ten bottom feeders. Middle of the road programs, maybe a little bit better in the SEC to the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten right now is the better top end programs, but on an average basis, the SEC I think is a little bit better. And because of how much more talented their average team is, that also adds to that opinion. LSU is a top 15 program in a conference where you have so many top 15 programs and also some programs who aren't quite where LSU is, but are getting better or have done a better job of maybe punching above their weight class despite their inconsistency, where LSU, because of their high expectations added on that, is putting a lot of pressure on a head coach who many consider top 10. So LSU, great program. It's just a question of can they beat other great programs to get to the mountaintop? I look at Ole Miss, finished 39-13, 21-11 in the SEC over the past 4 seasons. That is their 4-year window. In a 4-year window, which is where by the end of a 4-year window, your recruiting class that came in at the beginning of the 4 years, especially with the portal, is almost entirely gone at the end of the 4 years. So in that 4-year cycle, they finished 39-13. That is insanely impressive. And as much as I don't think Lane Kiffin is an elite head coach, see last season's blunders to some of the most incompetent teams like Kentucky or Florida's talented, but their head coach does not know how to manage a game in Billy Napier. That's impressive. They didn't reach the playoff despite the fact that I think they were one of the 6 best teams in America last year, but they did beat Georgia, which is a good thing, and they have a 2-3 record versus the FPI top 10 overall. Their other win coming against Penn State in the postseason in 2023. And that Penn State team was much stronger in power ratings than their final AP poll showed, even with all the opt-outs. It was an impressive win, I think. Kiffin has done a good job of using the portal, using it correctly, and applying it correctly. And they have punched above their weight class. They just need to be more consistent, and I think that relates more to the head coach than their resources and anything else that would surround resources. At 11, we have Washington. This may surprise people because Washington went 6-7 last year. They finished 35-18, 23-13 overall in the conferences they've played in the past 4 years. But the reason I still have them top 15, even with their fall off, is I think Jedd Fisch is a good coach, so that helps. The second year removed from today, 2023, they went 14-1, punched above their weight class, and unlike TCU and last year's Notre Dame, where Washington was power rated in between those, better than TCU but worse than Notre Dame per the power ratings, I think Washington's ceiling was actually that of a national title contender. They probably weren't going to win it all, given Michigan and if Georgia made it or Ohio State made it, just the overwhelming talent of other teams, but they beat Oregon twice, and that Oregon team per Bill Connolly's S&P Plus was viewed as one of the best teams of the entire 2020s. Like, that's how good they were viewed by analytics. The ceiling of that team was insanely high, and that, along with the resources it took to get that team to the mountaintop, and also Kalen DeBoer's 11-win campaign in 2022, that's factored in here. If they somehow won 10 games last year, this would certainly be a top 10 program. 3-4 record versus the FBI top 10, 1-1 in the CFP, 2-0 versus Steve Sarkisian over the past 4 years. I know that DeBoer's no longer there, but I like Jedd Fisch, and this roster still has talent, and they have a proud history. So all those things help. We have Clemson at 10th, 40-14, 25-7 record over the past 4 seasons, 2 ACC titles, 0-1 in the college football playoff, 1-3 versus FPI top 10. The only reason I didn't put them behind Washington was they have not had the lows that Washington has. A 4-8 campaign in 21, 6-7 last year. But Clemson's disappointed given their talent under Swinney. This is a huge year for them. Huge season, coming off an ACC championship, but also a playoff loss and a season where they lost 4 games and once again were not a top 10 team, which is incredibly disappointing given their past history under Swinney and the fact that they've had close to a top 5 talent roster over these past 4 years per recruiting. Their one win over the FPI top 10 was over Notre Dame in 2023 when they also lost 4 games, many to opponents they had no business losing. So this is a huge year for Clemson. Still a great program, but not where they were 5 years ago for sure. Tennessee, on the other hand, 5 years ago they would not have been close to this list, and now they're in the top 10. To go 37-15, 20-12 in the SEC, and to have 2 double-digit win seasons after your predecessors couldn't come close to that is quite impressive. I think Heupel overall has done a good job there. 2-4 versus the FPI top 10 over the past 4 seasons, and 2 of those wins, all of those wins over the FPI top 10 came against Alabama in 2022 and 2024. The fact also that I know Saban's no longer there, but for Heupel to come in and beat Alabama after that long losing streak was very, very impressive. And it wasn't their fault that they got seeded on the road against an Ohio State team who was a bad matchup for them and the best team in the country. I never understood why people thought Tennessee was going to beat Ohio State. I mean, this is someone who watched the Michigan game, thought to myself, my gosh, Ohio State may have done a pathetic job this year with how that Michigan game ended. And at the same time, I thought to myself, yeah, they're gonna beat Tennessee. It's a bad matchup. They should have never been expected to beat Ohio State in that game. And then they overachieved, in my expectations, the Buckeyes did by going on that awesome national title run. So that's all to say, Tennessee's a top 10 program. They're just clearly not one of the elites yet, and it will probably be a while until they are looking at who they are right now, but they're in a much better position than they were before Heupel got there. Notre Dame at 8th best program in America. 44-11 record is what they finished with over the past 4 seasons. Never a year outside the AP top 25, only 1 year with fewer than 10 wins, and yet they've had 2 losses to Group of 5 schools. It's absolutely insane. It's crazy. They have overperformed in a lot of ways, and yet at the same time, you still see cracks. I mean, that's how college football is, guys. And I'm saying this to talk about, I guess, take a shot at some of the playoff expansion arguments. Even your top 10 programs, even half of those usually are incapable of winning it all come season's end, or their odds are at least, to be more generous and probably realistic, their odds are just tiny. But Notre Dame has had a 3-1 record in the playoffs, 4-4 versus the FPI top 10. 3 of those wins came last year. The other win, I forget where it came from, but I did this a while back, tracked the top 10 wins against FPI. Oh, Clemson in 2022 when they blew them out. Freeman has a pretty good record against the top teams. His teams play to their level of competition. And at Notre Dame, what he's done there compared to what he inherited, he's actually upgraded them. I think he's upgraded their infrastructure, their resources, and he's very young. So I can see them winning a title in the next 5 years easily. We have Texas at 7th. I debated putting Texas higher, but 2021 still counts. 2022 does. And then last season they went 13-3. The year before that they went 12-2. I think Texas is back, but the 1-8 record versus the FPI top 10 certainly hurts them. It just has to. Like, that hurts. They have the same amount of wins against end-of-season FPI top 10 teams that James Franklin does. So that has to hold you back. It has to, at least from my perspective. But 38-17, 24-11 is what they finished with over the past 4 years. And over the past 2, it has been 25-5. 25-5, and they've only lost 2 conference games. One to an Oklahoma team that was top 10 in FPI in 2023, another to last year's SEC champions, the Georgia Bulldogs. They won the Big 12 in 23. They have a 2-2 record in the CFP. 1-8 versus the FPI top 10 hurts, but Sark showed in 23 he could go on the road and beat Nick Saban. That's pretty impressive. And they were competitive with Georgia last year. They gave Ohio State their toughest fight in the postseason, despite some injuries and self-inflicted injuries that can be cleaned up, for example, things that can be fixed by the staff. I am bullish on this program, and while I haven't been talking much about what I expect programs to be in the future, Texas is going to be, in my mind, a top 5 program from here on out. It's just some of their recent seasons, especially 21 and 22, which are factored in here, just are, because I think that anywhere from 3 to 5 years, I think, is a window you have to consider if you want to talk about programs, because sustainability matters. And Texas has had 2 great seasons in a row. Many of the programs ahead of them have had more than 2 great seasons in a row. But I'm higher on them for the future than this list might indicate if I didn't bring that up. We have Penn State at 6th. 41-14 over the past 4 seasons, 26-10 in the Big Ten, and half of those conference losses are from 2021. 2-1 in the CFP, 1-9 versus the FPI top 10, and their only win against the FBI top 10 came against Utah in the 2022 Rose Bowl. Penn State has always been great, or most of the time great under Franklin. Maybe some years flirting with near elite, especially in the power ratings, but never elite on the field. Never elite in the power ratings either. And some would argue that you wouldn't expect them to, because they just don't recruit at that level. They don't have the historic pedigree either that Ohio State and Alabama do, or that even an Oklahoma does, or a USC or Notre Dame do, for example. But Penn State should be better than this, in the same way that Texas should be. It's also a great place to be in. A top 6 program over the previous 4 years, especially when you're also factoring in 2021 just a little bit into that. I think Penn State's in a great place moving forward. At 5th, we have Alabama. I almost had Alabama 7th, but at the end of the day, I decided that they didn't have the down years that Penn State and Texas did. And they, right now, have a more talented roster than either by recruiting rankings. More importantly than that, though, because I really don't care about that, they actually have several wins over the FPI top 10 in recent memory, including one last year. Their win over Georgia last year was more impressive than any win Texas or Penn State had, so I just had to seed them ahead. 45-10, 26-6 over the past 4 years, 2 SEC titles, 1 college football playoff win, 2 losses, 5-6 versus the FPI top 10 again over the previous 4 seasons. In the future, I would have questions about them. I don't know if I'd guarantee them to be top 5 in the future, but they'll be close. There's an argument for them to rise from this spot. There's an argument to say that last year was just a transition year, and from here on out, they won't miss the college football playoff. What I like about Alabama is they're talented. I also think that DeBoer is a really, really good coach, and they went on the field, and they know how to reload. They've done reloading several times where they lose a bunch of talent, and just a bunch of talent rises up. And I don't know if that'll change from here on out. At 4th, I have Oregon. Oregon, 45-10, 30-6, Big Ten title, 0-1 in the playoffs, but winning the Big Ten in their first year there, I think, speaks to where this program is. And they're 4-2 versus the FPI top 10 in recent memory. Beat Ohio State last year, beat Penn State last year, lost to Ohio State last season. In 2022, they lost to Georgia, but they also beat Ohio State in 2021. And look, I mean, it's a good program. It's not just good either. I'd say right now it's a great program, a near elite one, if not an elite one already. I know people will say, what about the record in the playoffs? What about not having a national title in their history? Well, this is the past 4 seasons, and that means at most only 4 teams can win a title, and only 3 have. 3 schools who are all ahead of Oregon, so that's not a problem. And you look at their wins, losses, the fact that they have not had a season of fewer than 10 wins since 2021. They have fantastic resources. Lanning just brought in the best class in terms of quality rankings for the 2025 season, and they were the only team to go undefeated last season. They were one of the only teams. I mean, Texas did not win 2 games last season. They didn't win any game last season against the final FPI top 10. Oregon beat Ohio State and Penn State, who I thought roster-wise were about as talented as they were, and for Ohio State much better, and they were more established entering the 2024 season in the Big Ten. So maybe I've spent a little longer on Oregon than I should, but I think they're the 4th best program in America right now. Resources, I think, as a tiebreaker with their collective puts them over Alabama, and then their wins, and I think their coaching puts them ahead of Texas and Penn State right now, along with the fact they just haven't had a down year. Michigan's at 3. Now, Michigan would be ahead of Ohio State. They actually have a slightly better record over the past 4 years than Ohio State does, with the exception of the fact that Ohio State's the reigning national champion and Michigan's coming off of an 8-5 year. Recency, again, matters. 2024 matters a lot more than 2022 or 2021. 3 Big Ten titles, a national title, 2-2 in the playoffs, 7-4 versus the FPI top 10. Very impressive. Michigan is physical. They know how to win. Even in a down year last year, they beat 2 teams that finished top 10, actually top 5 in FPI. Ohio State at 1, Alabama at 4. The prior year, they beat Penn State, Ohio State, and Alabama. And I know Washington wasn't top 10 in FPI, but I thought Washington was certainly a top 10 power-rated team, just from my own personal opinion. That's not how it works, but anyway. Then the prior year, they beat Ohio State, they beat Penn State, and then the year before that, they beat Ohio State. I mean, this program is great. In the past tense, it's certainly elite in the past 4 seasons. We'll see what happens to it in the future. I would say from a future standpoint, Penn State, Oregon, Texas are certainly poised to probably jump ahead of them along with Oregon. But who knows? I think that their previous 4 seasons, especially the 3 seasons before last year, were much closer to what their historical norms should be than what a lot of people would care to admit. Number 2, we have Ohio State. 47-8, 31-5 over the past 4 seasons. National championship is what they won last year. They're 4-1 in the playoffs. 1 loss coming against a 15-0 team in 2022 Georgia. 9-5 versus the FPI top 10. And last year they beat 6 of their FPI top 10 wins came last year with only 1 loss. So entering last year, Day actually had a losing record against the FBI top 10 from 2021 to 2023. But a lot of those losses were also close and could have gone the other way. I've been a Day defender for a long time. I think he's easily a top 2 coach in America. I think he's number 2. I still think Kirby Smart's number 1, and I will strongly say Kirby Smart should be the only coach who's considered number 1, but Day should be the only coach who's considered number 2. No one's better than Day right now outside of Kirby Smart. And especially in the playoffs, which is where Day's at his best, and in the new format, that's the best possible scenario right there. This team is a demon, and he's a demon against the best in the playoffs. So Ohio State has a real opportunity to become the number 1 program. A real opportunity, especially with them losing a lot, and then Georgia and all the other top 5 recruiting programs losing a lot. That gives an opportunity for Ohio State to show that they're different from the rest of college football. And finally, at number 1, not going to spend too much time on this, we have the Georgia Bulldogs. 53 wins over the past 4 years. 53 wins. 53 of them. That is crazy. That's insane. 53 wins? They've averaged more than 11 wins. Heck, they've averaged more than 12 wins over the past 4 years. That's crazy. And that's with them only winning 11 games this past year and not winning a single playoff game. 4-1 in the CFP, 9-4 versus the FPI top 10. Only reason they didn't get more shots at an FPI top 10 with their tough schedules, especially last season's schedule, was the fact that they lost to Notre Dame. If they beat them, who's to say they wouldn't have beaten Penn State the following game? And who's to say they wouldn't have competed with Ohio State, for example? They've won 2 natties, 2 SEC titles. I'd say as of right now, they are by a mile the best program in football. Of course, things could change next year as 2021 is now an entire recruiting cycle away. And especially if a team like Ohio State or Michigan, but more so Ohio State because I don't think Michigan can win it all in 2025, at least they don't have more than a 1% chance while Ohio State does, then we may think of this differently. But as of right now, I think Georgia has the number 1 program in America. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. If you haven't already, please do those things. And I'll see you all soon. Again, comment your best programs in football down below. I'd appreciate it. All right, now I'm going to give picks for 2025 Big Ten win totals. Before that, let me check the chat, see what everyone's saying. Just a lot of different fans in here talking about a lot of different things. That's awesome. I love conversations with college football fans. No super chats. I will get to questions regardless at the end of the video, but if you want your question to have a guaranteed answer from myself, please send a super chat. Thank you very much. So let's talk about Big Ten win totals. Giving picks for them. Which teams will win more or less games than what Vegas sets? The Vegas win totals, specifically from FanDuel, which I'm using today, are out for the Big Ten Conference. And I want to go through them and provide you all with some picks. Give what I think are some pretty obvious overs and unders, at least from my perspective. If you strongly disagree, that's encouraged. Please comment that strong disagreement down below as the video goes on. And also give some ones that I think are riskier and ones that I would stay away from. I don't bet, but it's fun to go through these win totals, look at them, see what Vegas thinks or what they think is close to this team's most likely outcome, and discuss it. It's fun. So before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so that you can get notified when I go live Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, or when we release daily content here. Like the video and comment your thoughts down below as the video progresses, discussing your thoughts, your reactions to my takes. I love to hear it. And also make sure to click the notification bell for any of the podcasts and playlists I have in the video description, and check out the description to join our free Discord server. All of these things I've asked you to do are free. They don't sign you up for anything. So just do them. It helps you out, helps me out. Thank you very much. So let's look at the Big Ten win totals here. Let's check them out. When I look at the Big Ten win totals, my apologies for that glitch right there. I don't know exactly what that was. Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon are first at 10.5. Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois are tied for 4th at 8.5. Nebraska, USC, Iowa, and Washington, they are tied for 7.5, over under. Minnesota's at 11th with their win total set at 6.5. Michigan State, Wisconsin, Rutgers, and UCLA are all tied for 12th for 5.5. And then some others that I just didn't include in the column because they're pretty small, didn't have the space. Maryland over under 4.5 wins, Northwestern over under 3.5 wins, and Purdue over under 3.5 as well. So those are the Big Ten win totals right there. Obviously, you have your tier 1, which is extremely clear. That being Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. Those are the clear tier 1s. And then you have your tier 2s, Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois. And then you could include some of these teams in tier 3 because schedules determine win totals, not just power ratings. But some of these will also be tier 3 too. Nebraska, USC, Iowa, Washington. Maybe Minnesota could be included with them. Minnesota's schedule's weird. They have 2 guaranteed losses essentially, but then 10 games where they could win, and I think 2 or 3 of those games, if not 4, are guaranteed wins. So somewhere in between 4 to 10 wins is Minnesota's range, and I think that's why their win total is weird and isn't really grouped with anyone else's. It's just kind of out there on an island, especially when you factor in awesome defense, lack of a returning QB, he'll be a redshirt freshman who starts, and also lack of talent, but Fleck has tenure and knows how to develop players. So that's one I wanted to point out there, and that's one I'd actually stay away from. Some easy ones, easiest picks in my mind, are Penn State going over, Michigan State going over, USC going over. And the easiest unders in my mind are Illinois, and I debated this one, but I also think Ohio State is in my mind a pretty good under pick, and I'm going to explain why for all of these. For Penn State, it's essentially a 2 or 3 game schedule. I would say 3 games. You have the road game at Iowa and the home game against Indiana, where Penn State is much more talented than those teams, but those teams are good enough to where Penn State, in a very unlikely way, but still possible, could lose to them. So you can merge those 2 into 1 game. Then they have Oregon at home, Ohio State on the road. It's really a 3-game schedule because one of the Iowa or Indiana games will probably be a very easy win, and I don't think either of those teams match up with Penn State. So in the most negative way, Penn State plays a 3-game season. In the most positive way, they play a 2-game season. Depending on how Oregon reloads or doesn't and what Penn State gets better at, they could really have a 1-game season against Ohio State on the road. Penn State matches up well with Oregon. They're tremendously better than everyone else on the schedule outside of Oregon and Ohio State, at least in theory. They have essentially 9 guaranteed wins, and they're probably going to beat one of Oregon or Indiana, given both are at home. Have a much better chance of beating both than beating none. Ohio State is their biggest game. That's pretty obvious. And I think with how much they return, they're in the 60s in returning production. The only other Big Ten programs that can say that are Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Rutgers, Michigan State, and then maybe some of the lower level, sub 5 win total teams. No one in Penn State's win total class, Oregon or Ohio State, has their returning production. And Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois, there's a reason, even when some of them have some very workable schedules, like Michigan and Illinois, and I don't think Indiana is as hard as some make it out to be, they're a full 2 wins lower for a reason, guys. Full 2 wins lower. So Penn State, I think, is an easy over because they should have the number 1 QB in the Big Ten, definitely have the number 1 offensive line. They have Jim Knowles at DC, who's a huge upgrade, and Kotelnicki at OC. It's the best coordinator duo in football, and I think that's a unanimous opinion. They return a lot. They have some first-round NFL talent already. Wonderful developmental program. I could go on and on and on, but sometimes You can just use simple language to describe why something should be picked this way, or why you should make this prediction or go with this prediction. It's the fact that Penn State last year was arguably a top 5 team in the sport, and they're the only top 5 team in the sport who returns more than 60% of their production. The only one. And they're also the only team who returns 60% of their production, and they're top 4 in rookie draft players from their school in terms of snaps. So when their players get drafted, they're playing in the NFL. They're NFL ready. And combine that with the coordinators and everything else I mentioned, I think it's pretty clear that Penn State's going to at least go 11-1. Ohio State or Oregon may drop them to 11-1, but that's not below their win total of 10.5. Easy over. For Michigan State, do you really think they're going to go 5-7 again with that staff? And with a quarterback like Hayden Giles, who at times showcased that he may have had a 5-star ceiling? They return 60% of their production. They don't travel to Oregon. They don't host Ohio State. Their Ohio State games against Penn State, but they don't have a road trip against anyone who will probably be as good or that much more talented than them, like Oregon was last year. They also don't play Boston College on the road. They host Boston College. And they have a neutral site game against Maryland, who they should be much better than. They beat them last year and they return more. They should be better than UCLA and they get them at home. And then Michigan. Michigan's win total's 8.5. They play Indiana on the road, but Indiana's win total's 8.5. They play Nebraska on the road and Minnesota on the road, but 7.5, 6.5 win total. Michigan State plays a lot of teams who by preseason power ratings are better than them, but the only one they play who's dramatically better than them from a preseason standpoint is Penn State. That's it. There are several opportunities for them to realistically punch above their weight class and earn that 6th or even 7th win. And I think with the staff they have and with the track record Jonathan Smith has, it's an easy over. For USC, Lincoln Riley, including last season, where 5 of his 6 losses were by 1 score. And I count that USC game against Notre Dame as a close loss. I do, because having 2 pick sixes in the fashion they did and being able to tie up Notre Dame and play competitively with them when Notre Dame could do whatever they wanted on offense is impressive. I think it exposed Notre Dame's defense a bit and also showed that Riley and the team still has it on offense. He wins 70% of his close games, including the 5-6 close losses they had last year. Last year was his worst on offense, worst QB, even worse than Spencer Rattler in 2020. And Miller Moss for much of the year was probably the same as Rattler in 2021. So at least tied for worst for quarterbacking under Riley. How won't they get better? A lot went wrong for them last year, and their schedule is easier. They don't have to travel to Michigan and Maryland and Minnesota. They don't have to do that. They don't. Their traveling is much more aligned, and they get Michigan off of a bye and at home this time. And then before they go to Notre Dame on the road, they get a bye after. So Michigan and Notre Dame are some of their bigger games. They're back-to-back, and they're sandwiched in between byes. They're going to be rested for those games. And D'Anton Lynn's also going to be in year 2. The defense improved dramatically last year from 23. I think in year 2 it's going to improve dramatically again, especially with Gentry getting a full preseason to rest and the staff getting another full preseason to work with these guys. So I think USC is an easy over. I think this team's going 8-4 and 9-3. Could very well be better than that even, because I think the schedule aligns nicely. Ohio State and Illinois. Those are my easy unders. For Illinois, it's the fact that they return a bunch, and I mean a bunch. But when Ohio State or when Penn State or when Oregon or Michigan or USC or these programs that recruit at a top 15 level, when they return a bunch, you think, oh my gosh, they recruit well, they have awesome staffs, they have won in a very sustainable way, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is think of Clemson. Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, of course they can win it all. Last year they pushed Texas more than Texas would have liked, and they blew out all of the opponents that were drastically inferior to them. Why? Of course Clemson, with all they return, can win it all. Well, why can't Illinois? Because Illinois wasn't top 40 in power ratings last year, and half of their wins were by one score. Half of them. And if Michigan had competent QB play, and if Rutgers' defense wasn't injured and absolute trash, for lack of a better term, last year, they go 7-5. They do. And while I think they will be much better in a power rating sense, and I think they are going to go bowling and actually are going to have a winning season, so at least 7 wins, I think 7 or 8 wins is the most likely outcome here. I don't think they're going to win 9 games or more again. And if they do, then I'll be wrong. But they lost 2 close games, maybe only 1 if you don't count the Penn State game as a close one, even though by score it was. And they won 5 close games, 6 if you count the Michigan one as being close. That's an insane record. And they have to play USC at home, Indiana on the road, Ohio State at home. They have to travel to Washington, travel to Duke in week 2. A lot of places for them to drop a game. So I think with how the O-line struggled last year, what they lose on the D-line, the fact that they have some questions with coordinators, and Bielema's a pretty up and down guy, same with the Illinois program, I think it's an easy under at 8.5. At 7.5, which is where the win total previously was, I would have stayed away from it. But at 8.5, yeah. I mean, Vegas is even telling you it's heavily juiced to the under. And I think a lot of people are betting the over there. That's a trap. Don't fall into it. That is the easiest pick in my mind on this entire list, is Illinois under 8.5. Ohio State under 10.5 was hard. Very hard. Because Ohio State hasn't won fewer than 11 regular season games. Last year they did, but then the prior 2 years, even with some of their struggles in 2023, they won 11 games in the regular season. They did in 2022. And in 2021 and last season, all of their losses, except for the Michigan one in 21, were close. So there was an easy path to 11-1. But let me tell you why I think Michigan, or not Michigan, but Ohio State, why I think the Buckeyes are probably going to go under 10.5. So why do I think that? Why do I think that? Well, I think that because while their schedule's easier than last year, they still have to travel to Washington, to Wisconsin, to Illinois. All of those teams have win totals of either over 7, or with Wisconsin, they would if they didn't have America's toughest schedule. Number 2, they play Penn State, who is consensus preseason number 1, or consensus number 2 or number 3. They're consensus top 3. Texas, Penn State, and Ohio State are the consensus top 3. Clemson is only outside of that because some people rank them much lower than even 5. Like, some people just aren't buying it. They face 2 consensus top 3 teams. Both return anywhere from slightly to a good amount more experience than they do, and both have recruited the trenches better than they have. They have not recruited better at wide receiver, but in terms of game control, Texas and Penn State are more talented in aggregate on the line of scrimmage than Ohio State is. Texas gets them early. They've also had problems against Michigan, and they're starting a redshirt freshman quarterback. Even if they win one of those games, and the odds say they will, that's why it's 10.5 wins right there. Do you really think that a team that loses as much as they do, that loses the best defensive coordinator, that is starting an offensive coordinator in Brian Hartline, who hasn't called plays before, at least consistently, and their blue chip ratio on the O-line is below 50% for the first time in forever? Everyone's talking about this O-line, a top 10, top 5. Nothing in the playoffs said that last year. It said it was a good unit for college football with a wonderful supporting cast. If they had an elite O-line in the playoffs last year, they would have blown out Texas. It would have been a 30-point win. It would have looked exactly like Tennessee. It would have looked exactly like that, but it didn't, because Texas could cover, and on top of that, Texas could stuff the run. It's why Ohio State only had 2 drives where they could sustainably get a touchdown. All that being said, I'm lower on Ohio State than some people are. Surprisingly, I'm higher on them than a lot of national analysts are, which scares me a little bit. But they went 10-2 last year, and in another universe, they go 9-3 because they had 2 close losses, but also 2 close wins. With how much they lose, the newness at quarterback, not just the newness in terms of not much production there, but newness in the sense that you're going from basically a graduate dual threat QB to Julian Sayin, a redshirt freshman. And the fact that they're losing all they do on the D-line and what they lose in parts at linebacker and the safety spots at set of downs, and they have new coordinators, makes me think that between Texas, Penn State, and Michigan, they're losing 2 of those games. And let's say they beat 2 of them. Well, how do you know they won't lose to Washington on a long trip, or Illinois, or maybe Luke Fickell gets his big win when he played Ohio State competitively in 2023, or maybe Ohio State loses all 3 of their big games, or they win 1 of them, lose 2, and then they lose to some random team, which I think that's the least likely outcome, because Day doesn't lose those games usually. The point being, this will be a national title contender. This is definitely a team that at the end of the year will be top 8, top 6, if not guaranteed top 4 in power ratings. However, all that being said, combining what they return in coaching staff, in roster, how they've recruited over the past few years, how they've developed, results on the field, and the fact that, look, I've picked Michigan to lose to Ohio State 3 out of the past 4 years. Ohio State's 0-4 in that game. And last year was the worst game plan I've ever seen. And I don't think Ohio State, this is actually a big reason why I'm picking them to go under, is that whole thing with Michigan, on top of the fact that they start the year with Texas, who has more proven experience at QB, more returning on defense, more staff continuity, and also has recruited O-line better. So that will close the gap between Ohio State's massive experience gap on the O-line over Texas. Michigan's a problem, and I don't think the current narrative around that game helps Ohio State. It hurts them. If you want Ohio State to beat Michigan and overachieve in that game and get a guaranteed win on their schedule back, you got to stop telling them the only reason they lost was due to cheating. But that will never happen. It'll never, ever happen. They're going to have to overcome that on their own. And that, on top of what I think are facing 2 teams in Texas and Penn State that are better than them, means I think they're going 10-2. They're going 10-2. And I think they have a better shot at going 9-3 than undefeated, given the current state of super conferences. I mean, the only team in football who I think has a better shot at going 12-0 than 9-3 is Penn State and maybe Clemson. I don't think that anyone else outside of those teams and maybe Texas has a better shot to do that. Georgia doesn't. Georgia's a much better shot of going 9-3 than 12-0. Much better. Much better. So those are my easy overs and easy unders. Some tougher but confident picks. I think Michigan and Indiana at least go 9-3. Michigan has a floor of 6-6, but a ceiling of 11-1, 12-0. And their schedule's pretty workable, viewed by Kelly Ford rankings, shout out to him, great work on Twitter, as the easiest schedule in the Big Ten. Indiana returns as much as Michigan, and they fielded a much better team last year, and they have a much better staff. So even though they have a harder schedule than Michigan, the superior staff and I think superior starting roster means they're going to be a better team than Michigan, which compared to the tougher schedule means they'll probably go at least 9-3. You look at the unders. I think Oregon's going under 10.5. It's similar with Ohio State. Very similar. With Oregon, I don't understand how you can have the defensive performance you did in your final 2 games. You retain Tosh Lupoy. You lose your NFLD tackles. You lose a lot in the O-line. You lose a lot in secondary, which I think the secondary losses are addition by subtraction. The advantage Ohio State and Oregon have is their talent in terms of losing players, but the advantage Oregon has over Ohio State is Ohio State's just trying to tread water with their roster because they're already there. Oregon's still getting better in building their roster, so they can make addition by subtraction moves in more ways than most teams who recruited at top 5 level can, because they're still arriving. But Oregon still loses a bunch, and I don't have the same faith in Dante Moore that I do in Julian Sayin, because I think Day's reputation with quarterbacks gives him more benefit of the doubt than Oregon with Will Stein. And that wide receiver room with Stewart being injured, they're going to have someone step up. I think that's going to be Brycen Moore. I think he'll be amazing. But with how much they lose and the fact that they're in a transition period, Texas, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia have already arrived at the fact where they can reload if their staff plays their cards right. I don't quite know if Oregon's done that, and they have to get Penn State and Indiana early. On top of that, they have a road trip to Iowa, and they have some other games where I just look at it and I think to myself, like, they play Rutgers on the road. What if they have their worst game of the year on the other end of the coast and Rutgers has their best game of the year? I don't know. We saw 16-13 against Wisconsin last year, and Rutgers is nearly double the travel distance, or at least 1.5 times the travel distance. A lot of things with this schedule, they could work in Oregon's favor, but they could also work against Oregon depending on how they replace that talent. So I'm confident that Oregon's going 10-2 and not 11-1. Stay away from Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Rutgers, and everyone else below them. UCLA, Maryland, Northwestern, and Purdue. Stay away from them. Just do not touch them. Nebraska could win 10 games because it's Rule's third year, and they have Raiola paired with Holgerson, and I think they finally have a good O-line. They could also go 6-6 again or 7-5 because they have a ton of questions on defense, and Dylan Raiola, while he's very talented, it might take him more than another year in college to become the superstar that the recruiting rankings said he's going to be. You look at Minnesota, awesome defense, but they have 2 guaranteed losses, and I don't know what their O-line or QB situation looks like. I'm confident they're running backs, but they lost their best offensive tackle, and they go from Brosmer, a vet, to an inexperienced guy in Drake Lindsey. Wisconsin is a very tough schedule, so they could be top 25 or even top 20 in power ratings like Florida was last year and go 5-7 or 7-5. In any of those records, that's over/under. Just to stay away. UCLA, Maryland, Northwestern, and Purdue, I think are teams that I view are so bad that I could pick them going under, especially UCLA. I think that's inflated because of Nico. But they could also go over because they have just enough talent and some of them have just easy enough schedules to where they could sneak out a few wins. And Purdue, I would say under at 3.5 intuitively, but losing 9 games is a lot of losses with what I think is a massive staff upgrade. I could see them getting to 4 or even to 5 and winning close games. I could see that. And then circling back to some confident picks, but tougher ones, Iowa, they'll improve on offense, but that defense is questions, and they play Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana. Washington, they have the QB, they have the wide receiver, they have the running back. I just don't think they have it on defense or the trenches right now. And if I am going to be wrong anywhere, it's going to be Oregon, who's plus 100 at over 10.5 wins, or Nebraska, who's minus 134 at over 7.5. Those are odds from today at FanDuel. Oregon has an easy enough schedule relative to facing top 10 opponents to where they could lose to Penn State but beat everyone else pretty easily. And for Nebraska, they're heavily favored to go over 7.5 wins, and I might be overthinking their situation. If the offense is awesome, and awesome in the sense of the best Nebraska offense we've seen in years, and a top 30 unit, which is way better than what it was last year, and the defense is just average, they're going over, probably. The odds say that at least. And a lot of the teams they play outside of Michigan, Penn State, and maybe USC, and maybe Iowa when you factor in development, they have a talent edge over. Like talent edge in recent history, even going the most pessimistic route possible, says this team's going 8-4. So I might be wrong to tell you to stay away from Nebraska. It might be just intuition and something that's obvious to pick them to go over. I don't know. We'll have to see. But thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I don't know why that glitch happened, but whatever. It didn't block out any graphics, didn't ruin the quality. Still, it's a good video. I had a lot of fun doing this. So like if you haven't already, subscribe, hit the bell. I appreciate you very much, and I will see you all very soon. Now we can move on to some early predictions. This will be a short one. It'll be fun. I'm going to enjoy it a lot. Let me see what people are saying in the chat. We have a lot of people on here right now, a lot of them at over 20 likes. This is pretty awesome. Again, if you have a super chat, send it in, and I am obligated to answer your question. If not, submit questions, and maybe I'll get to your question towards the end of the video. And I think someone's here talking about, someone mentioned Ohio State 6-7. Like the people who say Ohio State this year can go 7-5 are idiots. There's a 99% chance they won't go 8-4. Although maybe for the first time in years, there's at least a 1% chance that happens. But it won't, because 1% chances don't happen. And if they do, the hindsight influences you saying, well, I should have picked that. It's like, no, you shouldn't have. The absolute floor for Ohio State's 8-4, but that would require injuries and the staff hires all going in a horrible direction for Day. That's too much wrong to happen to Ohio State at once. So 9-3, 10-2, 11-1 is what you're looking at. And while I think 12-0 is extremely unlikely, it's much more likely than 8-4. It just is, with how the talent breaks and with the fact that I view Day as one of the best in the business. Day personally is like, taking off the unbiased analyst glasses, Day's one of my favorite head coaches. I seriously like the guy. Like there's nothing unlikable about him outside of last season's post-game press conference when it came to the Michigan game, and he said that we have to run the ball more. Like that was the one thing where I wanted to like pull my eyes out of my sockets. But the guy's really likable, and he's one of the best in the business. And I think he's going to be at Ohio State forever. And consequently, I think Ohio State's going to be an elite program forever. Let's get to these predictions, though. So I have some early predictions for the 2025 college football playoff that I wanted to share with you all. This is not me filling out a bracket, but hold on, stay with me. I want to give some predictions, some of which I think are very bold predictions about what I think the college football playoff field can look like and how it might be different from what it was in 2024. So we'll get to that, and I'm going to get to that now, actually. Before I do, I just want to tell you to subscribe and hit the notification bell and like the video. And also that I think there are going to be some new teams in the college football playoff this year. Teams that have either never made it before or who made the 4-team playoff but missed it last year. So tell me down below any teams you think will make it this season that didn't make it last season, or some teams that have never made the playoff in its history that will make history this year. Let me know down below. Also, go into the description and join the Discord server, which is free. Everything I've asked you to do is free, doesn't sign you up for anything. And also, it's the same thing with hitting the notification bell for the podcasts. Those are playlists for content that is either all of my content, the college football podcast, or for any of the specific team podcasts, depending on the video you're watching. That way you can follow specific teams and more closely follow my channel as well. So thank you for doing those things. Check out the description if you want to support the channel monetarily as well. There's a Patreon page and merchandise store link. Anyway, I want to move on and get to prediction number 1, because that's what we're here for. We're here to talk college football. So prediction number 1 is that the title game participants will be totally different. That Ohio State and Notre Dame will not play in the national title game. Doesn't mean they won't make the playoff. It's not what I'm predicting. I'm just telling you they will not be in the Natty. It's not happening. I don't think this one's very bold at all, but you can tell me in the comment section what you think. And my justification for this, neither return 60% of their production. Both, especially Notre Dame, I think have massive downgrades at defensive coordinator, but I think Ohio State is a massive downgrade there as well. Ohio State also goes from an experienced play caller to an inexperienced one on offense. They both have a lot of youth. They're very, very young teams. Ohio State was senior laden last year. One of the oldest, if not the oldest, roster in the sport last year. Notre Dame was much younger, but they also had some older depth pieces who stepped up throughout the year. Many of them transferred out or exhausted eligibility after last season. So both teams get younger, and they have coaching replacements. And I think looking at their portal moves and their incoming classes, they're either staying the same, treading water, or even regressing a little bit in overall team talent. And I think that's especially the case with Notre Dame. Notre Dame will be better at QB. And Ohio State will be better at linebacker and corner. And maybe both will be better at certain positions as well. But I think overall they're going to be worse teams. There's a chance they could even be significantly worse teams than they were last season. And that combined with other teams getting stronger, leveling up their talent, or returning a lot, means I don't think they will play in the national championship game. They will not win it all this year, let alone play for the title game. I don't think it's that bold, though. And both would be in my top 5 of teams that I would select to win it all in 2026 when they should bring everyone back, or close to everyone. Okay. Prediction number 2. Just had to read a text there. It's for a school project. So, no worries. Anyway, enough with the distractions in my personal life. Prediction number 2, there will be 4 or more teams that weren't there in 2024 that'll make it in 2025. Any Big 12 or Group of 5 team, I think, is a contender, or at least the majority of them are, because there's just so much chaos and turnover there. I think some other teams to pay attention to are LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M, who's never made it before, Michigan, USC, who's never made it before, and Miami, who's never made it before. And there are some others, too. Louisville could make it. Totally. Georgia Tech could make it. I think that if Lenora Sellers is the alien I believe he is, and South Carolina reloads at other positions, they could make it. Florida, if enough teams lose 3 games, I think can make it. And there are probably some others I'm not even mentioning. Oh, Oklahoma. If enough teams lose 3 or 4 games, maybe Oklahoma. And maybe Illinois too, even though I'm not really a believer in them this year. But they have the returning experience in the QB to where if they play their cards right, they can. And there's probably others as well I'm still not mentioning. So when I look at the field, I think there are enough teams regressing and enough tough schedules for some of the better teams like Georgia, or Notre Dame has a tougher schedule than they did last year. I think that Oregon has some issues they may have to overcome that are bigger than some people realize. Ohio State has a tough 3 or 4 game schedule, though the other 8 games are, I think, pretty easy, close to guaranteed wins. And I look at, like, Clemson. Like, what if Clemson has some issues and their schedule's harder than it was last year? Or they reach the ACC championship game with only 2 losses or 3 just like last year, but they lose it. And they just get barely left out, for example. So I think that there will be some teams last year, whether higher up or the fringe teams, like not even talking about the bigger teams who I think a lot of them lose production and have questions. Is SMU going to make it again with all they lose? I think the odds say most likely no. Is Indiana going to make it? I'm high on Indiana, but they do lose some guys. Curtis Rourke was a winner in college, and that matters. And they have a much tougher schedule. Will Arizona State make it again? With how many close games they won last year, the odds actually say they're not favored at least. Will Tennessee make it again? Who knows? There's enough teams that made it last year that I can easily see missing the playoffs, to where I think there will be 4 more teams that will make it who are new to the 12-team playoff, some of them new to the playoff overall. Prediction number 3, the favorites will win overwhelmingly. That's always going to be the case in college football, especially in a national championship playoff caliber format where you get longer rest and therefore the better coaching staffs even have a larger advantage. However, at least one underdog wins their college football playoff game, whether first round, second round, semifinal, or championship. I don't know. The odds are, given how the format works, that the further you go, the more likely an upset happens, because you go from, campus games where the higher seeds host the lower seeds, and likely that means all the higher seeds will almost always be favored. And then you have the teams with the byes who will have some points added to them, and more likely than not, those teams will be better. And if they aren't, Vegas views it as a neutral field game. And then the teams that survive and advance, the best teams, well, they're constantly punching above their weight class or winning, and a winner who's an underdog could always beat a winner who's the favorite. Anyway, maybe that was redundant to say. but one underdog will win a victory. And I think some underdogs who could do this are Oregon and Ohio State. I think that these teams, in terms of performance, could start the year not even top 10. I think they have that much potential for issues. But they also have so many alien players or potential alien players at QB, wide receiver, defensive back. Oregon has them, I think, 2 at defensive end. Ohio State has, I think, at least 1 at linebacker, potentially some at corner, and they have an awesome tight end. Oh, same with Oregon. They have enough pieces on both sides of the ball to either confuse offenses or to spread out defenses to where if those teams make it as lower seeds, and maybe because of some poor performances, they aren't top 3, top 4, top 5 in power ratings, I could see them pulling off upsets, like totally. I also think that Day is at least a top 2 coach in America. He could be the best coach in America specifically as it relates to the playoffs, although I would still put Smart there. But if you only want to talk about coaches and how they do in the playoffs, Day actually has an argument to be number 1, which is very impressive. And I think that Lanning will learn from the Rose Bowl last year, and I think Lanning has done a very good job of punching above Oregon's weight class, especially in 2024. There are some other teams, too, who could fit that bill for sure, but those 2 really stick out to me. Others, just 2 more, would be Clemson. Due to being in the ACC, they may not get enough quality wins to be power rated high, and they're actually much better than the power ratings think. And Indiana returns enough to where if they play their cards right, they could be a better team than they were last year, and they could actually pull off an upset. Prediction number 4. No at-large CFP participant has 3+ losses. The only one last year that did was Clemson, and they got him because they won their conference. They were not an at-large participant. The only at-large participants, once again, will have 2 or fewer losses. Some would say this is bold. I don't think it is at all. I think the schedules actually align quite nicely for a lot of the top contenders for this to happen yet again. Prediction number 5. This one, I think, is somewhat bold, and most people would think it's very bold. But I've talked to some people, and they don't think this is bold at all. It's that 2 of the top 5 recruiters is in recruiting programs, in addition to Notre Dame, so the national championship participants and anyone who didn't participate in the Natty game but recruits at a top 5 level, 2 of those will just miss the CFP entirely. They won't make it. So that's 2 of Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas. And maybe you can include Clemson in that group too, because Clemson's like a fringe, top 5 talent roster. Only 1 missed it last year. I'm picking 2 to miss it this year. And a big part of the reason why is last year, Ohio State and Georgia returned a lot. I think Oregon and Texas returned slightly more last year than they do this year. Alabama lost a lot, but I also think Notre Dame returned a fair amount, especially when you factored in them adding Riley Leonard. These teams across the board, outside of Clemson, return less, and Clemson still returned a fair amount last year. And on top of that, they have a lot of coaching losses. I mean, Notre Dame and Ohio State lose really good DCs. Ohio State loses an OC who down the stretch especially was good. Oregon has questions at DC. Texas, they have staff continuity. Georgia does too, but they have questions at OC and also quarterback. And Alabama just has straight up questions, like all across the board after their 4-loss campaign last year. I really think that like Notre Dame, Texas, Oregon, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, 2 of those, even though all of those coaches I view as top 10 coaches, seriously, all of them, I think 2 of them will miss entirely. It also doesn't help that all of them, I think, face at least tough schedules. Like Ohio State's schedule's easier than it was last year, but it's still tough. Oregon's is a little bit harder than last year. Not the toughest in the world, but it has challenges. Texas's is harder than it was last year. Notre Dame's is much harder than it was last year. Georgia's is easier, but last year they had maybe the toughest schedule in college football history. It's still a hard schedule. And for Alabama, also a hard schedule. Factoring all that in, along with a lot of newness at different positions, I think means that 2 of these programs, maybe more, Also maybe less, but 2 I think at least are going to miss. And you will have some teams that have easier schedules or that return a lot, or that maybe have better coordinators or maybe more solid quarterbacks rise and take their place at least this year. This also coincides with maybe a 6th prediction that I could have made, but we'll close out the video here, where I think that all of these teams, these 6 that I'm talking about here, almost all of them will be better in 2026 than they were in 2025. In fact, I'm going to round that up and say all of them will be better in 2026 than 2025. All of them. So that's going to be exciting to witness all of these teams, all of them improve in 1 year compared to a prior year. And they're still all, in my mind, going to be top 15 teams. And if you take Alabama and Notre Dame out of the equation, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas, I think are all at least going to be top 8 teams. So, yeah, like 2026 is the year I'm looking forward to. We still have this year to get to, and I'm looking forward to it as well. But man, we are blessed. We as college football fans are blessed. But that's the final and maybe boldest prediction I have, is that some of the top programs in college football, they're still going to be top programs, and I'm not going to really change my opinion of those programs and coaches, and yet they'll miss the playoffs, and many will overreact and be like, oh my gosh, well, Kirby Smart's no longer the best coach in football, or Marcus Freeman was so overrated, or Kalen DeBoer sucks. Like, no. The reality is the teams at the top just aren't built like how they used to be due to the portal and more teams contending for that top recruiting class, and mega donors don't just exist at the historic top 3 recruiting programs. They also exist at Texas Tech. They exist at Oregon. They exist at Michigan. They exist at Penn State. Even Indiana has a pretty nice NIL. So things are leveling off just a little bit at the top. And with the new roster limits too, I think that will also just help a little bit some of the depth disparity. So combining all that into account, I think some of these top end programs just miss the playoffs. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll see you all in the next one, and make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. All right. So this video is going to be one that I am going to talk about. It's going to be fairly short. And yeah, before we get to that, I'm going to answer the other super chat. So this is a $5 super chat from goingforgold_85. Thank you very much for that. It's a $5 super chat. 1% chances don't happen. The 21 Huskers would like a word with you once we're done shaking our fist at the sky. Love the channel, Sam. We'll go Big Red going for gold _85. It's nice to see you on here. And yeah, 1% chances typically don't happen, but there is that 1% chance where the 1% chances happen. And analytically, that was 2021 Nebraska. They had better odds again to go 11-1 that year than 3-9. And they went 3-9, which just, it sucks. But at the end of the day, it might be for the best. It might be going for gold. I think you're in a good position with Matt Rule. A very good position. So let's get this out of the way and then move on. A 16-team playoff. Have you ever heard of this proposal before? A 16-team college football playoff that is straight seeded, yes, has no buys, an even bigger yes, and then takes the traditional New Year's Six Bowls with their traditional conference alignment to the best of our ability and makes them third place consolation games. In my mind, that's an even bigger yes, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. This is a viewer question, a question that a viewer posed to me about this format. He just wanted to ask me what I thought about it. So we're going to talk about that today. And before I tell you more details about it, more than the basics, please like, subscribe, hit the bell. Do those things. They're free, doesn't sign you up for anything. And comment your thoughts on this bracket down below. And visit the description to check out my Patreon page, merchandise store, and also the different channel podcasts that I have. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon. Okay, so back to this. I love this format. I love this proposal, and I will make future videos about it. I wanted to do a segment to talk about it and express some thoughts I have. And also, while I don't have a graphic for this, to talk about what this would have looked like in the with last year's playoff format, for example. So I know 12-team format. I know, but still, let's do this. So last year's format in the 12-team college football playoff, we had Oregon, Arizona State, Boise State, and Georgia receiving the byes. That is what we had. It's exactly what we had. And we had Ohio State, Tennessee, Texas, Clemson, Penn State, SMU, Notre Dame, and Indiana as the other 8 participants. So here's how it would have worked last season. Here's how it would have worked. So Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame win their games. All the home teams win. They advance. And none of the bye teams win. And then you get to the semifinals, and it's Ohio State, Texas. Ohio State wins. Notre Dame beats Penn State. Notre Dame, Ohio State, Natty. None of the national title teams, none of them play in these third-place games because the national title game is who's 1 and who's 2. So if you reach the Natty, you don't play in this third in any of these New Year's Six Bowl, now Consolation Bowl games. You don't. You just don't do it. And yeah, you don't do that. I'm having a little bit of a brain freeze here trying to think of what I was going to say next. But those two are in the Natty. And yes, this is what I want to talk about. The national title is also always at the Rose Bowl. Now, this person told me that in their ideal format, the national title game is just called the Rose Bowl. It's not called the national title game. The Rose Bowl and the national title are one and the same, like they were in the early 2000s and beforehand. I kind of, for almost pragmatic purposes, disagree with that. I like the idea of the Rose Bowl being a game where, like, an old Pac-12 team can play against, a Big Ten team, so on and so forth. Or maybe I'm redundant. Let me know what you think is better. The national title game rotating between neutral fields like it is, or it's just permanently the Rose Bowl. Or maybe the Rose Bowl is different from the national title game in name, but they're at the same location. Let me know what scenario you think is the best when I come back making a more detailed proposal with this format, because I love it, and I want to thank Jude Hansen, viewer of the channel, for providing it to me. It was provided via my Discord server, actually. So join my Discord server in the description. It's totally free. And type any question you have in the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel. And on Wednesdays at 6 p.m., I answer questions from my viewers. So in the national title game, those participants don't play in the consolation games. So then you have 10 teams left in the 12-team era. Oregon, as the best overall seed, who lost. And then you got Penn State. In a Rose Bowl, where maybe you let the best Pac-12 team fight the best Big Ten team remaining, maybe you have a Penn State-Oregon rematch in the Rose Bowl. And ideally, you'd have contracts so there aren't opt-outs, and the players would have insurance and stuff, so if they get injured. Or maybe it is an open practice, and you let opt-outs happen, but it's still fun because it's college football, and you'd rather have some college football than not, for example. So that might be a Rose Bowl game. Or think of the Sugar Bowl, traditional Big 12 or just current Big 12 since the conference isn't abolished, versus the SEC. Well, the highest remaining SEC team is Texas. That's the highest remaining team. So you get Texas, and you position Texas against Arizona State in a rematch, which, again, you'd have a lot of rematches in this format. But to heck, they can play against each other again, and either it's another entertaining game of football, or maybe since Georgia won the SEC and they're the SEC champions and you can't take that away from them, Georgia versus Arizona State. And you keep the whole champion thing. Since Ohio State's in the Natty, it goes to the next best Big Ten team, which is Penn State. That would technically be Oregon. So I can see how this gets confusing. You can probably tell my brain's being turned into a pretzel here, but I like the idea. Or what about the Orange Bowl? Orange Bowl is typically either Big Ten. It's either Big Ten or it's Big Ten or SEC, maybe Notre Dame against the ACC. That's how it traditionally was. So the ACC champion is Clemson, and you pit Clemson against Let's say Indiana, the next at-large Big Ten team. Or maybe you pit them against Tennessee, for example. That would be a pretty fun matchup that didn't happen in the playoffs. And then the Cotton Bowl, I think the Cotton Bowl used to basically be the G5. You have the Fiesta Bowl and all those tie-ins as well. I just think it'd be a fun way to end the season. You get some extra practice time, maybe for backups. I know for a lot of these teams in the playoff, the season would already be long. This would be extending it for some of those teams. But the season wouldn't be longer for any of the teams who are playing in the Natty. And it would be a good way to host those games maybe leading up to the Natty game. Like the day or 2 days or 3 days before, and say, hey, we have days of football leading up to the national title. So it's like getting you excited if you aren't fatigued, which was a problem last year. It's getting you excited for the big matchup. And I think that might actually keep more fans engaged as well, because the title game happens so far after normal bowls are over and the regular season's over, and even after the semifinals and quarterfinals are over, to where you have so many teams and fan bases that are already checked out and into preseason mode. So let me know what you think about this proposal. I'd love to get your thoughts. I love it. Obviously, there are some issues, but I love the overall concept. I think it does a good job of bringing back some traditions that we may not see again. All right. This video is going to be cool because it's talking about teams that I think need to put up or they need to shut up. That is what we are talking about next here on College Football with Sam. Very excited to do so. Again, if you have a question, type it in the comment section. Once again, I'll encourage you to super chat, especially since right after I'm done with this, I have to go because the sun sets in 50 minutes, and I want to mow the lawn, and that typically takes 40 minutes or at least a little bit longer. So, yeah, just a little bit of a personal life detail. And then after that, it'll be releasing these videos for tomorrow and studying for my class, which ends this Tuesday. But let's talk about some CFP contenders who need to put up or shut up. And some of these maybe aren't CFP contenders, but these are teams that really should be CFP contenders, and they either aren't or they are, but they just haven't lived up to the expectations of their fan base or university. So which college football playoff contenders, or teams that need to be college football playoff contenders, that want to be college football playoff contenders, which of them need to put out this year? They need to do well, they need to go over their win total, they need to exceed their preseason expectations, or at least meet them. They need to break that glass ceiling, or changes need to be made. Which are those programs? I'm going to talk about this here on College Football with Sam. Let me know what you think of this question. Let me know which teams you think it's a do or die year for, or a year that they need to at least prove they're more than outsiders think they are. Let me know what you think. Who needs to prove in 2025? Who needs to prove something to secure their future in football, whether as a coach or even as a program, to do something they may not be able to do in the following years? Let me know down below, and please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and again, comment those thoughts that I asked of you down below. Check out my Discord server, which is free to join via the link in the description, and if you want to donate to the channel, you can sign up as a paid member on the Patreon page through the link in the description. But let's start off, really talk about only for a minute for each of these here. Auburn finished 5-7 last year, 2-6, 14th in the SEC. Their over/under win total is 7.5. They brought in Jackson Arnold. I love Cam Coleman. Caleb Wheatland was a good transfer incoming at linebacker. I love Connor Lew at center. And they have players. They've upgraded their talent roster in a really neat way. But let me tell you, Hugh Freeze has disappointed the first 2 years. Fans have been patient. It's been understood that he's in a rebuilding situation, but he has to do better. They have to get to 7, if not to 8 this year, I think, to output enough to give Freeze some job security and to help him move forward at Auburn. We have Clemson next. They finished 10-4, 7-1, second in the ACC, and they won the ACC. Their over/under win total is 9.5 wins, though, and they return a lot of production, over 70%. And when I look at the Tigers, I see a roster that can and should expect to win it all. I think they have the number one quarterback in the sport in Cade Klubnik. Second best is their neighbor, their rival, South Carolina Lenora Sellers. Shout out to him. And they have an awesome receiver corps. Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, Antonio Williams. And then on the D-line, TJ Parker, Peter Woods, Sammy Brown I think will do really well at linebacker. And they brought in Tom Allen, who I think is at least a better defensive coordinator than Wes Goodwin. And Garrett Riley's there for a third year. They have the talent. Their coaches won 2 national titles. They've done a really good job retaining their roster. They got Will Helt in the portal, who I think is going to be one of the better DNs in college football this year. They need to win it all. Or at least they need to win the ACC and win a playoff game. Or just go above and beyond what they did last year. It's not quite natty or bust, but at the same time, if you make the argument it is, I'm not going to stop you. And to a certain degree, I actually think, yes, I'm actually going to say, for Clemson, I believe, based on where they're heading, it's a natty or bust here. For Florida State, 2-10 last year, the absolutely toxic 17th finish in the ACC, over-under win total of 7.5. They have to get to 8 wins. They have to go over that win total, in my mind, for Norvell to deserve any type of faith or benefit of the doubt at Florida State. Last year erased my entire view of him as a head coach. I thought he was one of the better coaches in the business, really loved where he had his program going. I hate it now. I don't think it's going to work. I think that the coordinator hires he made even reek to a certain degree of desperation. Florida State is in a total put up or shut up year, in the literal sense of the term, even more so than Auburn, and I think way more so than Clemson. Clemson, the put up or shut up is relating to whether you win the Natty or you don't. They're still one of the better programs. Florida State, they're in a worse position than any of the programs we talked about so far, and maybe even a worse position than anyone else on the list coming off of that year. They have to do better. They have to break through. And Thomas Castellanos with Gus Malzahn, and then what they return on defense and limited supply with Tony White, I don't know if that'll cut it. It's a huge year for Florida State. It's a huge year, too, for LSU. Bring back Garrett Nussmeier, bring in Josh Thompson, guard from the portal, return Whit Weeks, return Harold Perkins. They get an A.J. Halsey. They bring in Gooden at defensive tackle. Bring in Jack Pyburn from Florida. It's like, oh my gosh. And then Aaron Anderson back at wide receiver. They have a lot of talent. 9-4, 5-3 last year. Had some embarrassing losses. Kelly is on the hot seat. The only thing that may protect him from getting fired if they miss the playoffs is his buyout. 8.5 over-under win total implies they're going to be on the fringe of making it, but probably not in it. They can't do that. They have to win 10 games this year in the regular season, or maybe they lose to Clemson but go 6-2 in the SEC and find themselves in Atlanta. They at least have to go to Atlanta. They have to. Or if they don't, they have to make the playoff. They have to do something better than they've done over the previous 2 regular seasons with what they have coming back and with Kelly's pedigree and the talent and resources he has. We have Miami up next. They went 10-3 and 6-2. You may think, why is it a put up or shut up year? They won 10 games. It was the best season for Miami since 2017, if not maybe even better than that. Well, they shouldn't have gone third in the ACC for one. I don't think they exactly wasted Cam Ward, although they came pretty close to it, if not entirely did it. But the 8.5 over-under win total with that schedule is what tells me this is a put up or shut up year. Miami is not being picked to reload. 8-4 with the talent they have, or even 9-3 would not be reloading. They'd be taking a step back. Their schedule is tougher, yes, but they should expect to, with the conference they play in, win 10 games every year from here on out, or 11. They have Florida and Notre Dame non-con, and then some games against Louisville and SMU that are tough. So I understand, maybe 9-3 ain't so bad. But you hope with the talent and the replacement of the DC, the old DC, Guidry, with Heatherman, that there are some upgrades. I think Miami needs to once again win 10 games, and I would go even further and say with the talent they have and the fact that they're dramatically increasing in talent while Florida State's dropped off, Clemson is dropping off, long term that they should try to make the playoffs this year. That should be their goal. They need to put up or shut up in relationship to being a program that can be one of college football's elite. Doesn't mean it's final say this year, like some others, but I think they're in contention. And before I go any further, I want to thank Justin Ziegler for bringing this up, because he asked this question, what teams need to put up or shut up? He asked the question in my Discord server, which I invited you to join earlier, and I'm inviting you again to join now. Join the Discord server via the link in the description, and ask a question. Ask me a question in the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel. I'll put it in my log, and eventually this preseason I'll answer it. Michigan needs to put up or shut up. 8-5 with the talent they had on defense was unacceptable. If they had J.J. McCarthy, at any point he was there at Michigan, if they had Bryce Underwood at quarterback, they would have went at least 9-3, if not 10-2, and played in Indy and reached the playoffs. That was a disastrous season for Michigan. And the win over Ohio State, the winner over Ohio State is, I would say even after Ohio State won the Natty, the win over Ohio State was more damaging to Ohio State than it was a help for Michigan in terms of the near term. Long term, the win over Ohio State still helps because it can help change the perspective that Ohio State really is the far better program and always will be than Michigan, because they have been recently, especially in the 21st century. And yeah, but the win over Ohio State doesn't erase the 5 horrific losses, many of whom were to inferior competition, at least by recruiting rankings and some even by power ratings. Doesn't erase that. They have to win at least 9 games for the season to just be meh. Going under the 8.5 win total is a failure. Total failure. And I would say in order to have a successful year, they have to go 10-2, which means they have to make the playoffs. Oklahoma, put up or shut up. If Venables doesn't win at least 7 games or maybe even 8, I'm convinced that he's gone. He's gone. They went 6-7 last year, lost to Navy, and believe me, that only piled on things, because losing to a service academy, no matter how many opt-outs you have or how disinterested you are in a bowl game, is just, it's not a good look, because a service academy is just that talent limited. 6.5 game win total doesn't give me optimism, but they have John Mateer coming in along with Ben Arbuckle, and then that with the talent they have on their roster, I think is a reason to maybe pick them to put up and overperform this year. We have Penn State. Penn State. So last year I said that Ohio State was not in a national title or bust year because they have the talent to win it all every year, and therefore they don't win it all this year and just win it all again, especially with what I thought were some problems that they had in terms of maximizing their chances on staff or even on roster, some of which were wrong, some of which were right. Michigan in 2023. I was under the impression at the time that Harbaugh was going to be there for a while. That was clearly wrong, but I thought since he was there for a while, had a really good staff, and, you know, was doing better in big games, especially against Ohio State, and got in Ohio State's head, that as long as they play for a natty this year, depending on the opponent they play, the season will at least be good. Now, when it turned out the cheating scandal happened, and then when they matched up against Washington, yeah, that's a national title or bust year right there. You can't lose to Washington in the playoffs. You couldn't lose to Texas. The only possible acceptable losses in the title were Georgia. That was it, literally. With Penn State, I kind of find them in a more precarious position than Ohio State, obviously, because they don't have the same talent, or even Michigan, because Franklin isn't as good as Harbaugh in the big games, wasn't. And Penn State hasn't beaten Ohio State the prior 2 years before this year, like Michigan did in 23. They hadn't built credibility in big games slowly like Michigan did. Ohio State's always had that credibility. They also have always had the talent. Penn State doesn't have the credibility or the talent to be a national title favorite every year, like they do this year. And they have a better staff on paper than Michigan or Ohio State does, in my mind. I think Penn State is a title or bust team this year. Like them and Clemson, you have to win the title, I think, for the year to be a success. And if you don't, it's not that the year's a failure, like, let's say, other seasons where, whether in the preseason or the regular season, it became clear, okay, this team has to win it all. Ultimately, they just, anyway, Penn State has to do something. They have to beat one of Ohio State or win the Big Ten to, in my mind, have at least an okay year, and then they have to win the title for it to be a really successful year. Same thing with Clemson. They can win the ACC and win some playoff games. It's just like, yeah, it's a good year, but for it to be a resounding success, they have to win it all. And for Penn State, I think they should, and I'll even say in this video, I think they will. Next up, we have Texas Tech. Texas Tech, very, very interesting case here with Texas Tech. The Red Raiders, they are a team that when I look at them and their roster, they should win the Big 12, and they should win the Big 12 by a mile. They have the most talent in the Big 12 by a fairly long shot. So again, gotta win the Big 12. But the question is, will they? That's a big question right there. Will they win the Big 12? I think this year they have to reach the playoffs in order for Joey McGuire to have faith. I think with the money they're investing, with the collectives they have, with the resources they have, if he doesn't produce this year, I think he's gone. We have USC up next. It's very simple. I don't think Riley's on as hot of a seat as some people think, but you can't go under your win total. You have to go 8-4. You have to go 9-3. Just win 8 or 9 games, beat a team who's good, improve throughout the year, and show that with the incoming recruiting class you have, also hold that class together. With the incoming class you have and the staff that you've assembled, you can have a huge year in 2026. And last but not least, we have Wisconsin. I love Luke Fickell. I do. But with the schedules he got assigned with, and the fact that he tried to change Wisconsin's offense too early, and he had some injuries, but also factoring in Wisconsin has a proud history and they don't like to lose, all of those things kind of align against Fickell trying to get his feet out of the quicksand, and it seems like the quicksand's swallowing him up. They have to go bowling, I think, for him to be safe. Now, he could go 5-7, and he's also safe, but don't risk it. Go 6-6, improve record-wise from last year while having a tougher schedule, and don't get blown out in any of your games. A lot of close losses in a bowl game, I think, would buy him enough goodwill to really show himself in 2026 when they will probably have an easier schedule. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys all soon in the next video. I just say that stuff to make it easier. Like that's literally why I say that. I think pretty obviously. Okay, doesn't look like we have another super chat. So yeah, I'm going to do my top 10 teams really quickly here. It's just going to be about like a 10-15 minute video, and then I got to get out of here because I got to start mowing the lawn. So okay. Yeah, let's do that. We're going to be live. We're already live for 2 hours. That's really scary. Really scary. But let's get to it. Okay. Today I want to... Gosh. Who are going to... I'm in my own head now, guys. Sorry. Who will the top 10 teams in college football be in 2025? Who will they be? Let me know in the comment section below before I tell you who my top 10 teams are for 2025. And by that, I mean who will be the best teams in America when whichever team that wins the title hoists it. Who will be the top 10 teams? These are my top 10 power rankings. I'm not a computer, not an algorithm, not totally unbiased, or at least unbiased relative to the information I'm fed. So I'm not going to call it power ratings, but these are my power rankings, top 10 for the 2025 season. Not all of these teams I'm predicting to make the playoff, by the way, but I think they will be the 10 best teams in America when it's all said and done. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit the notification bell, like the video to give us a boost into the algorithm, and tell us your top 10 teams down in the comment section below, and I'll try my best to reply to as many top 10 lists as I can, just giving some of my thoughts and saying, unless I think it's absolutely horrific, that I think it's probably a pretty good top 10. This is a very wide open year this year, I think. I'm going to start from the 10th best team and finish with the best team in America, at least in my opinion, although I think the best team in America is pretty unanimous. Also, check my description for any links to join my Discord server or support the channel monetarily. At number 10, we have Alabama. 9-4, 5-3 last year. Their preseason win total's 9.5. They're second in Bill Connolly's S&P Plus, being viewed as 27.9 points better than the average college football team. And the RP on the screen, that's returning production. They returned 64% of their 2024 production, 29th in America. I love Alabama because they have a deep roster. I think Kalen DeBoer is the third best coach in America. And on my all-SEC team, I have 18 players on my top 4 SEC teams and 4 additional players on my 5th and 6th teams. That's third in terms of number of all-SEC players, and I think they have one of the better staffs in the SEC as well. Not quite the best, but I like Alabama. I have questions with them at quarterback. The quarterback competition actually gives me pause for 2025, and I think their offensive line's overvalued. But I love Jam Miller. I love Ryan Williams, Isaiah Horton, Jeremy Bernard. I think that Tim Keenan III is one of the better D tackles in America. Love LT Overton and Deontay Lawson. And Bray Hubbard, Keon Sabb, Zabian Brown, Damani Jackson, and Deshaun Jones. That's quite the defensive back room right there. Number 9, I have Michigan. 8-5 last year, 5-4 in Big Ten Conference play. Their win total's 8.5. They're 10th in preseason S&P Plus, viewed as 21.5 points better than the average college football team, and they returned 65% of their 2024 production. Michigan, what I love about them is their defense and the fact that I believe they are going to get better on defense, and they're going to reload in parts on the D-line. D-line is going to take a big step back, yes, but it will still be one of the better units in America with Rayshon Benny, Trey Pierce, Trey Williams, Damon Payne Jr., and Ike Iwuna. All of these players are going to be around or over 300 pounds, and they have more players buried in the depth chart that are around 300 pounds, capable bodies to play. Derek Moore, I think, is an All-American caliber edge, and TJ Guy and Cam Brandt, I think, are players that'll step up too. They return all of their DBs and linebackers outside of Makari Page and Will Johnson, who was injured for half the year. Offensively, they do return enough on the O-line to where maybe they'll improve, maybe they weren't, but I think the O-line at the end of the year was far from the problem, especially on the interior. And Bryce Underwood is a much better quarterback, even as a true freshman, than anyone starting for Michigan last year, by a mile. Their staff has questions, but it has upgraded, bringing in the OC Chip Lindsey from North Carolina. At 8th, I have Miami. 10-3 last year with a 6-2 ACC record, 8.5 preseason win total. They're 18.8 points better than the average college football team per Bill Connolly's preseason S&P Plus. That's 12th. And they return 57% of their 2024 production. That's 60th. I love Miami. Love them. In fact, per my ACC team, all ACC team, they have 23 players, the most in the conference. And when I factor in the 5th and 6th team, the honorable mention teams, they have the most in the conference by a mile, by 7 players more than even Clemson, who's second there. What holds them back is their lack of an obvious alien, and the fact that they're still trying to transform their roster from having to use the portal in some ways to being so talented that they only need to use it supplementally. Carson Beck, I like him. Think he could be an All-American at QB, but he has some health questions. And the problem, too, with Miami is they're stacked in some positions that aren't as important as others. I think they're stacked at running back, for example, but at defensive tackle, they have some concerns there. Like, they don't have a proven guy who's close to an All-American level, I think, now that, Ruben Bain Jr.'s definitely at D-end. For a brief portion there, I think he was listed at edge. I love Ruben Bain Jr. I love Akeem Mesidor. I think their linebacker group with Raul Aguirre Jr., Mohamed Touré, and Wesley Besant is going to be good. And with Charles Brantley coming in, along with Xavier Lucas and O.J. Frederick coming back in the new DC, I think their defense will be good this year. And Francis Mauigoa is the best offensive tackle in America. Doesn't hurt either. At 7th, I have Indiana. Lowest team out of all these in preseason S&P Plus, 23rd, viewed as 12.2 points better than the average college football team. They returned 62% of their production. Preseason win total is 8.5, and their record in 2024 was 11-2, 8-1 in Big Ten play. I'm going to keep it simple with Indiana. They were top 10 in FPI and returned 62% of their production, which is more than Tennessee, more than Ohio State, more than Oregon, more than Texas, more than Georgia, more than Ole Miss. They return a lot more than other teams' top 10 FPI. Now, Indiana also doesn't have the talent or pedigree those teams do, but Fernando Mendoza's getting some NFL draft buzz. I think he might be an All-American this year in the system that he's in. They brought in Roman Hemby at running back from Maryland. I love Pat Coogan and their guards, their interior O-line. Elijah Surratt's one of the best wide receivers, bless me, in America. What I love about them especially is their defense under Bryant Haynes. Tyreek Tucker and Dominique Ratcliffe are great at defensive tackle. Kamara could be the best D end in the nation, and Pons could be the best corner in the nation, and they upgraded their special teams. And staffs typically have their biggest impact in year 2. Indiana staffs in year 2. So there's a good chance this team could be better than last year. I think a much better chance than a lot of people believe. At 6th, we have Ohio State. Now from 7th to 6th, I think there is a jump in, especially in terms of being able to win it all. I don't think Indiana or anyone before them has a really even solid chance of winning it all. It's a chance, but not solid. Ohio State, meanwhile, is a good chance of winning it all. 14-2 last year, 7-2 in Big Ten Conference play. They won it all. Their preseason win total is 10.5. They're first in S&P Plus, viewed as 29.5 points better than the average college football team, and they're 92nd in returning production at 48%. When I look at Ohio State, I see a team that is loaded. I see Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, who I think are the 2 best wide receivers in America. Caleb Downs, I think, is the best defensive player in America. I love Arvell Reese at linebacker. Love him. Sonny Styles comes back, which is good. And I think their starting defensive line, while not elite or near elite, will be good or great. Depth is a concern there, though. They have Max Clare at tight end, who will be awesome. And a lot of people love their O-line. And I think it's going to be a good unit. But elite, I don't quite think so. And Julian Sayin, while I'm pretty optimistic about him, it's not known whether he's going to be elite or not. There's just a lot that's leaving, and both coordinators are gone and replaced with guys that don't have the same pedigree as the previous ones. That's why I have them at 6th. But they could be first. This is the first team on the list who I can confidently say I can see them actually being first when it's all said and done. At 5th, I have Clemson. 10-4, 7-1, win total of 9.5, 23.3 points better than the average college football team per S&P Plus, 8th nationally there, and first in returning production, bringing back 80% of their players. Clemson bringing back 4/5 of their production is insane. I think Cade Klubnik's the best quarterback in the country. Ryan Linthicum is a great center. I love Blake Miller and Tristan Lay at tackle. I think they have the 3 best receivers in the ACC. TJ Moore, Bryant Wesco Jr., and Antonio Williams. And then you got Peter Woods, DeMonte Carpart, TJ Parker, Will Helt, Jaheim Lawson, Stephilan Green. A 6-deep D-tackle room. It's much deeper than that, but those are 6 guys who I think are great or better college football players. And they upgraded their defensive staff. So watch out. Clemson can win it all this year. Very confident that they can. We have Oregon at 4th. Oregon is higher on my list than others because I think, while they lose a lot, because their roster wasn't quite where Texas's or Ohio State's or Alabama's or Georgia's was last year. It was close, and they got a lot of players drafted, much like those schools, but some of those were through the portal more than others. Like Oregon used the portal more heavily than any of those schools. And they're in a position right now where they're transitioning from a team that is leaning more heavily on the portal because they want to win now, and they have to win now to lean more on the portal. They have to lean on the portal more to win now. And now they're transitioning to a team that is relying more on their recruiting talent and developing. And I'm high on that. I think Lanning punched above his weight class last year. 13-1, 9-0. Their win total's 10.5 preseason. They're viewed as 24.7 points better than the average team per S&P Plus, which is 7th. 43% returning production, which is 104th. I love Mackay Hughes. I love Mateo Uyunglele and Tatum Tuioti. I think Betcher coming back at linebacker is huge. And I think that Trey McNutt or Naeem Offord, or more importantly, Brycen Moore, I think a lot of those true freshmen, the higher-ups, are going to shine. And then combine that with Isaiah World, Alex Harkey, Manuel Pregnon, those 3 incoming transfers on the O-line, and Iapani Lalolu. This team, once again, is going to be a bowling ball. The only reason they had that one loss is because Ohio State was even more of a bowling ball last year and the best team in America. We have Georgia at 3rd. Speaking of a bowling ball, I would not underestimate Georgia this year. 11-3, 6-2 in SEC play. It was Kirby Smart's worst team since 2016. Their preseason win total is 9.5. 4th in preseason S&P Plus at 26.9, and they return 46% of their production. They have the best head coach in America. I think the 3rd best staff in America. I love their defense. I love their D-line. I think that Christian Miller and Xavier McLeod could be the best defensive tackle duo in America this year. I love C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson, what they have at linebacker there. K.J. Bolden, great young safety last year. I think he'll step up and have an even better year in 2025. I'm not worried about Gunnar Stockton because I think the O-line will maybe not have the same ceiling it did last year, but the probability of having that many injuries and instability I think is low. And they improve at running back, Nate Frazier and Josh McCray. They'll be healthier there. So I believe that they're going to do better at running the ball. Their offense may not have the same ceiling, but at the same time, their wide receiver core gets way better. So if Stockton can take steps forward, I am confident this team can win it all. Even if he doesn't necessarily, their defense and what they have just talent-wise gives them a chance, more than a chance. Looking at Texas, 13-3 last year, 7-1 in the SEC. Once again, 9.5 win total. No team in the SEC is a higher win total than 9.5. 26.4 points better than the average team per Bill Connolly's S&P Plus. That's 5th. And they return 51% of their 2024 production, which is 82nd. I have Texas with the 2nd best staff in America. I have Arch Manning as a preseason elite QB, All-American. I have him as a top 8 QB, top 10 QB nationally. Don't know if I'm quite all in on the top 5, but he'll be better than Quinn Ewers, I think. This will be a stronger year for quarterbacks overall, and he'll be placed higher than Ewers was, so that will be very helpful. I love C.J. Baxter healthy, combined with Contravion Wisner and Jarrett Gibson. It'll be a loaded running back room. And their O-line, you know what it'll do? It'll reload. G.J. Campbell's the only consistent starter coming back, but I think Cole Hudson, Neto Umozolu, and Trevor Gooseby and Brandon Baker are going to have big years. Wingo will break out, bring in entries from the portal, along with D-tackles Cole Brevard, Murad Watson, and Travis Shaw will help too. And they have the best linebackers in America with Anthony Hill Jr., Trey Moore, and Leona Lofu. And don't forget about Colin Simmons and Michael Taff on defense either. And last but not least, Penn State, who I think is the best team. So from Indiana to Ohio State, we had a jump. We had kind of a cliff from Ohio State down to Indiana. From Penn State down to Texas, I think there's a little bit of a cliff too. They have the best staff in America, easily best coordinator duo between Jim Knowles and Kulnicki, combined offensive and defensive play callers, easily the best. They went 13-3 last year, 8-1 in Big Ten play. Their preseason win total is 10.5. 3rd in preseason S&P Plus, 27.7 points better than the average college football team per Bill Connolly. And they return 65% of their 2024 production, which is top 25. They return Drew Aller, who I think is a top 5 quarterback, Nicholas Singleton, who I think will be the best running back in America this year, Allen, who I think is a top 10 running back. They bring back Dawkins and Olavega Ione, who I think are top 10 guys on the interior. Cooper Cousins, I think, will step up. They have 3 tackles, Nolan Rucci, Anthony Dunco, and Drew Shelton, who have NFL written in their futures. And they fixed the wide receiver room. Pena, Ross, and Hudson coming in from the portal gives them 3 quality starters. And I think Denmark might be good enough to be a reliable 4th guy in case injuries happen or they maybe want to spread out defenses. Tight end, there'll be a drop-off, but they'll reload some there with Luke Reynolds stepping up and Khalil Dinkins coming back. And I think they have one of the deepest defensive lines in the nation, more so at D tackle. DN, they suffered some injuries there. I think that they're a little bit thin there, but they returned Dennis Sutton. And I think with Knowles, I think that their linebackers and safeties will tackle better. And that was a problem with them at linebacker, was tackling. And then A.J. Harris, I think, is going to be the best corner in America this year. So a lot of words to fit in, so I was tripping over myself. But I love Penn State this year. This is, I think, going to be one of the best teams, not just this year, but even in recent memory. There is a chance that this team can be viewed as better than the previous 3 or even 4 national champions, or at least some of them. I'll go out and say that. And I'll even make a video on that. So make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, especially if you want to see that video explaining why I think Penn State can be one of the better teams, not just this year, but in recent memory. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you all around and see you very soon. And speaking of which, I will see you guys very soon. I will for sure. So our viewers dropped off. I don't know if that's people thinking that I'm an idiot for placing Penn State that high. Hi, Chimichanga Guy. Good to see you here. He's a moderator on the channel. But it's also because I think I ended my video out saying finally. So it's giving people a hint that, yeah, this is about to end. So this is about to end. We don't have any more super chats. I have to get going to activities, really. I need to critically get to that because we've been live for over 2 hours. I went much longer than I wanted, but it was a blast. I had a lot of fun. These videos will be up very shortly, like as soon as tomorrow, a lot of them will be up. So I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, and God bless. Happy Father's Day as well.